Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling primate cognition. It's fascinating stuff. I'm really eager to dig into how our primate relatives think.
It's a really dynamic field, and we're learning new things all the time about just how smart these creatures are.
Our guide for this deep dive is Primate Cognition, a book from 1997 by Tomasello and Call. Now, it might be a bit older, but it's a classic in the field. It'll give us a solid understanding of the core concepts, and by the end of this, you'll be able to tell the difference between how a monkey thinks and how an ape thinks. Plus, you'll walk away with some cool facts that just might turn your world upside down.
Yeah, I think what's so cool about this topic is that it shows us how much primates have in common with us mentally, but also all the fascinating ways their minds have adapted to solve problems. It's really remarkable.
Okay, so get this. There's this study where researchers set up TV monitors in a chimp enclosure. They wanted to see how chimps would react to seeing themselves and others on screen. Well, during a game of hide-and-seek chimps versus humans, the chimps started using the monitors.
Wow.
It was like they were using the technology to track the researchers' movements and outsmart them.
You've got to be kidding me. That's incredible. So it's not just instinct. They were strategically thinking and using the tools available to them, just like a human would.
Right. And that's just one example. This book dives into four main areas of primate intelligence: spatial memory, their understanding of hidden objects, tool use, always a big one, right?
Yeah.
And their social intelligence. We're going to break down each area to figure out what makes our primate relatives tick.
Like solving a puzzle. Each piece gives us more insight into the bigger picture of how they think and how those amazing minds of theirs have evolved over time.
Love that analogy. Okay, so let's start with spatial memory, basically, how they navigate their world. We've all seen monkeys swinging effortlessly through trees, but it's way more than just instinct. They actually create mental maps, just like we do.
Exactly. It's called cognitive mapping. Think of it like having a GPS in your head, a map of all the important stuff in their environment. Food sources, potential dangers, even shortcuts. It's crucial for their survival.
And this one study with yellow-nosed monkeys totally blew my mind. They learned where researchers had hidden food in their enclosure, and instead of just going back to the same spots randomly, they used the most efficient routes to get to their snacks.
So they were planning their moves, huh? That's wild.
Right. It shows they weren't just relying on memory. They were actually understanding the layout of their surroundings.
There was another study with Japanese macaques that was pretty cool too. These monkeys love acacia fruit, but it grows on vines that can be pretty far apart. Well, researchers noticed that when a monkey found one ripe fruit, it didn't just keep searching nearby. It went straight for trees where new acacia vines grew.
So they understand the connection, the relationship between the trees and the fruit. That's amazing.
Yeah, it suggests they have a pretty complex understanding of their environment, way beyond just food is here.
It makes you wonder just how detailed those mental maps really are, right? Have you ever seen an animal, even a pet, and thought, wait, are they actually planning their route? I feel like they pick up on way more about their surroundings than we give them credit for.
I know what you mean. It really makes you appreciate just how much is going on in those brains of theirs.
Okay, so we've tackled those incredible mental maps. But let's move on to something even more mind-boggling. Hidden objects. We all know babies go through that stage where they think if something is out of sight, it's gone forever. It's called object permanence, and you know what? Most primates, they get it too. They understand that things still exist even when hidden. But here's the kicker.
They might not be as obsessed with hidden objects as human infants. It's kind of funny when you think about it.
Wait, are you saying our need to poke and prod at everything, to constantly explore, might be uniquely human?
There's this really interesting study where researchers compared human infants to chimpanzees and bonobos. And guess what? The human infants spent way more time messing with objects, trying to figure out how they work and how they relate to each other, while the chimps and bonobos were kind of like, okay, it's there, moving on.
That is wild. It makes you think. Is our constant need to fiddle with stuff, to figure out how things work, part of what makes us, well, us? What does that say about how our brains develop differently?
That's a great question, and it's something researchers are still trying to figure out. It's possible that our brains are just wired for that constant exploration, that need to understand cause and effect.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, so primates. They've got a good grasp of where things are, even when they're hidden. But what about using objects as tools? I mean, that's next level intelligence, right? And let me tell you, primates are masters at it. But it's more than just grabbing a stick and using it. It's about understanding how that stick can be used to achieve a specific goal.
You're right. It points to a deeper understanding of cause and effect, the idea that your actions can have an impact on the world around you.
Exactly. The book talks about this amazing observation of a chimp using not one, not two, but four different tools in a row to get honey from a bee's nest. It was like watching a tiny engineer at work.
Now, that's what I call impressive.
Talk about problem solving. But here's where the difference between monkey and ape intelligence really gets interesting. They both use tools, but researchers are still debating whether monkeys really understand those underlying causal relations as well as some apes do. It's like the apes might be thinking, if I use this tool in this specific way, I'll get the result I want.
It's a much deeper level of understanding.
Right. And there's a study where chimps and capuchin monkeys were given this puzzle. They had to push food through a tube to get it. Chimps. They figured it out super fast. Pushing the food away from them at one end brought it closer at the other end. Simple physics.
Makes sense.
But the capuchin monkeys, they eventually solved it too, but it seemed more like trial and error, less about understanding the physics of the situation.
Interesting. So they were able to learn, but maybe not grasp the why behind it?
Exactly. We use tools all the time without even thinking about it, right? But for other primates, it gives us a glimpse into their intelligence, their problem-solving abilities, and how they see the world.
It's a great reminder that intelligence comes in many forms, and what seems simple to us could be a huge cognitive feat for another species. It's all relative, right?
Absolutely. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground already. Spatial memory, understanding hidden objects, and tool use. Primates are clearly killing it in these departments. But there's one more cognitive domain we need to explore, and it just might be the most complex and fascinating of all: social intelligence.
Now, this is where things get really interesting.
I mean, think about it. Their whole world revolves around social interactions. We always joke about office politics being like a primate troop, but their social dynamics are on a whole other level.
Oh, absolutely. Primate societies are incredibly complex. You've got these webs of relationships, alliances, rivalries. It takes serious brain power to navigate all of that.
The book really drives home that it's this constant game of strategy. And one of the biggest factors is dominance, right?
Definitely. Dominance hierarchies, they're like the foundation of primate social structure. It affects everything. Who gets the best food? Who gets to mate? Who gets groomed? Even where they sit within the group, it's all tied to dominance.
So it's their version of social status, but with much higher stakes. Like the book mentioned that dominant individuals, they often have certain ways of showing their status, specific postures, certain calls they make.
Exactly. And the subordinate individuals, they have their own signals too. Ways of showing submission or trying to appease the dominant ones. It's like this whole unspoken language of power and status that's constantly being spoken.
It's like that saying, it's not always about what you say, but how you say it. Except for them, it's more like, it's not always about what you do, but how you do it and who you do it to.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just about brute force either.
Yeah.
To really maintain your spot in the hierarchy, you've got to be socially smart.
So it's not enough to be the strongest. You've got to be socially savvy, knowing who to buddy up with, when to throw your weight around, and maybe when it's smarter to back down.
Absolutely. And remember, we were talking about redirected aggression earlier. That's a perfect example of primates using their social intelligence.
Oh, yeah. Like if a primate can't directly retaliate against another one, maybe because that individual is higher up in the pecking order, they might target someone else, a relative or a close friend of the one who wronged them.
It's really quite clever when you think about it.
It's like they're thinking, okay, I can't mess with you directly, but I can make you think twice by going after someone you care about. Talk about social maneuvering.
It suggests they not only grasp individual relationships, but how those relationships connect within a larger social network. That's some high-level social strategizing.
So we've got all this dominance, aggression, and it's like primate politics, right? But their societies aren't all cutthroat competition, are they? Cooperation's got to play a big part too.
Oh, absolutely. Cooperation is essential for their survival. They work together to defend their territory, to raise their young, even to find and share food.
It's like those chimpanzee hunting parties they described in the book. A group of chimps, all working together, coordinating their movements to surround and capture their prey.
The level of planning and communication involved in those hunts is incredible. And they often have to change their strategies based on what they're hunting and the terrain. It shows real flexibility and intelligence.
It's like they're running a well-coordinated team sport out there. But it makes me wonder, do they consciously understand that their fellow chimps are thinking, feeling beings with their own goals and motivations? Or are they just responding to cues in a very complex but ultimately instinctual way?
That's a question that has puzzled scientists for a long time. It gets at the heart of what we call theory of mind.
Theory of mind. I've heard that before, but refresh my memory. What exactly does that mean?
Basically, it's being able to understand that other individuals have their own minds, their own thoughts, beliefs, desires, that their inner world is separate from your own.
So if a chimp has theory of mind, it means they understand that another chimp isn't just reacting to the environment. They're actually thinking, planning, maybe even plotting.
Exactly. And proving that in primates has been incredibly difficult. There's been some fascinating research, some observations, some experiments that seem to suggest they might have some level of theory of mind,
But
but it's tough to say for sure. There are always other possible explanations for their behavior that don't require us to say, okay, they definitely understand each other's minds.
so it remains a mystery for now. We're peering into these complex minds, but we may never know all their secrets.
And that's part of what makes this field so fascinating. Every new study we do opens up more questions than it answers. It really makes us think differently about what it means to be intelligent and conscious.
Okay, so far we've talked about their social structures, the importance of dominance, the power of cooperation, and this whole mystery of theory of mind. But there's one more piece of the social intelligence puzzle that we can't ignore: communication. Because, let's face it, primates have some pretty ingenious ways of getting their messages across. I mean, think about it. They have this whole range of signals, calls, gestures, facial expressions, even. It's like their own intricate language in a way.
You could say that. It's fascinating how each species has developed its own unique system of communication, shaped by where they live and their social structures. And while it might not be as elaborate as human language, it does the job. They get their point across.
Right. And sometimes their communication can be surprisingly sophisticated. The book gives this example of vervet monkeys. They have different alarm calls for different predators. Like they've got one for leopards, a totally different one for eagles, another one for snicks. And each call, it triggers a specific escape response in the other monkeys. It's brilliant.
It's like a built-in warning system that's perfectly tailored to each danger. And that's a prime example of what we call referential communication. Those calls aren't just expressing fear or alarm, they're actually giving specific information about the threat.
Wow. That's amazing. So the calls actually refer to something specific in the outside world. But how do they learn to make the right calls? I mean, are they born knowing this stuff?
That's a great question. And it turns out learning plays a big role, just like with human language. Young vervets, they might make mistakes at first, giving the wrong call for a predator, but over time they get it right through observation and, well, let's just say a little parental guidance.
So they pick it up as they go, just like we do. It's incredible how much learning shapes their communication. And it's not just those alarm calls. What about gestures? We use them all the time without even thinking. Turns out primates are big on gestures too.
Oh, definitely. Gestures are a powerful form of communication, and primates use them for all kinds of things, expressing their emotions, letting others know what they're planning to do, even strengthening their social bonds.
It's like their own silent language. I remember the book mentioning this one gesture chimpanzees use, the arm raise. They use it to initiate play, like saying, hey, let's have some fun. No need to fight, just a little playtime.
It's fascinating how gestures can evolve. That arm raise, it likely developed from a more physical action, maybe like play fighting. Over time, it became this ritualized gesture, something symbolic.
So their communication can change and develop new meanings over time. It's kind of like how our own language evolves, which makes me wonder, what about those studies where they tried to teach chimps and gorillas to communicate using sign language or symbols? Did they ever really prove that apes can learn language like we do?
It's a question that has sparked a lot of debate in the field.
Mm.
Apes can definitely learn to connect symbols with objects and actions, and they can even string them together in simple ways.
So there's definitely some learning happening there.
Right, but most scientists agree that as impressive as their communication skills can be, it doesn't have the same complexity as human language. The grammar, the ability to create completely new sentences and express abstract ideas, it's just not quite there yet.
So maybe we won't be having a philosophical debate with a chimp anytime soon, but it does make you think about how remarkable their communication abilities are, even if it's not quite the same as our own.
Absolutely. It really highlights the incredible diversity of communication systems in the animal kingdom and just how much we still have to learn.
And that wraps up another deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, explored some fascinating studies, and hopefully busted a few myths about our primate cousins along the way. From those incredible mental maps to their mastery of tools and that whole intricate world of social intelligence, primate cognition is truly mind-blowing stuff.
I totally agree. And, it's not just about understanding other primates. It also makes us reflect on our own intelligence, our own social lives, even our own communication styles.
So true. Well, for anyone listening who wants to take an even deeper dive into this topic, I highly recommend checking out Primate Cognition by Tomasello and Call. It's a classic for a reason. And as always, keep those brains buzzing, and we'll catch you on our next deep dive.